Now to break down some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Auditor John Dougal and Salt Lake City Councilman Charlie Luke. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Let's start off with immigration. I was covering a naturalization ceremony during the week. Senator Romney was there. Talking to him after, he said we need a grand compromise on this between Republicans and Democrats. Charlie, let's start with you. What would a grand compromise look like in your eyes?
Well, anything other than completely closing the border. I mean, I think that right now is what's really driving all of the narrative. You know, I heard the same thing from Senator Romney. I'm hopeful that he'll be able to come up with something, but I think, you know, looking at immigration debates of the past is really where we ought to go. I mean, both parties aren't that far apart, or they shouldn't be that far apart. We've become much more polarized on this issue. And I think we need to bring things back. You know, there are a lot of things that we can do with immigration to, you know, continue to have strong immigration laws, but, you know, locking kids in cages, building a wall on the border isn't really accomplishing anything. And so that it's focusing on those real things that I think we need to be doing.
All right, John, let's bring you in. What do you see as a potential grand compromise?
I think the grand compromise really means to be, let's make it easier to come here legally. Let's make it harder to come here illegally. Let's have the government focus on its job of immigration enforcement. Let's get businesses out of that business. Let's admit that E-Verify doesn't work. And you know, those that want to come live and have a better life, let's welcome them. But clearly, if you want to live on the dole or commit crimes, we got plenty of folks that do that already.
Okay, now let's get into the, you kind of hit on this. Mm-hmm. You know, there are ideas that are close, but there's this line drawn in the sand, and neither party seems to want to give what the other one would like. So is a compromise even possible in this day and age?
No. That is a good question. I mean, look, Washington, D.C. is extremely dysfunctional right now. You know, and both parties are to blame for that. I think if we focused on what John was talking about, you know, if we focused on making immigration, you know, opening it, making it possible, and enforcing laws, then, you know, then I think we can be looking at that. I think if we look at the Dreamers, I think if we, you know, there are things that both parties really shouldn't be that far apart on, but because of the circumstances in Washington, D.C. right now, I agree with John. I don't think it's possible because I don't think anything is possible to get done there.
All right.
It feels like crisis, but it's going to get worse, I think, when it comes to immigration. So that's the unfortunate thing, and too often Congress only works when it's truly in crisis, when it's in meltdown. And so while we've had chances on both sides to compromise in the past, unfortunately I don't see them doing it.
Senator Romney hit on asylum particularly, saying that rogue players have really learned how to game the system that way. Do you like any of the ideas you're hearing on changing asylum laws, potentially seeking asylum in a country before you get to the United States if you're, you know, coming from somewhere further, or possibly even being able to seek asylum within an embassy within your own country?
I think it's possible. I mean, look, there are people, there are groups that will manipulate whatever rules are there, whatever laws are there. Asylum, you know, there have been some, you know, pretty bad cases of folks who have used that and have come in and committed crimes. But by and large, that is not the case. I mean, asylum is something where when people are trying to seek a better life for themselves and their family, when they leave a Central American country because they fear for the safety of their children, we shouldn't be even talking about, you know, well, maybe we ought to do this with asylum or that. You know, let's focus, I mean, let's let people in. Let's focus on what the laws are. And if we want to change them, fine. But is asylum the biggest problem for illegal immigration right now? Absolutely not. You know, but it is something, I think, to your point, where both parties can, you know, come together if there is willingness to do that. I'm not sure if there is.
The biggest issue in Utah, my understanding, violations of immigration are those that overstay their visa. So they're folks that came here for school, for visiting family, other things like that, and overstayed. So the asylum issue isn't really an issue here in Utah.
All right, John, we're going to start with you on this one. What are you hearing from Democratic 2020 hopefuls as far as the immigration debate goes?
Well, basically all I hear is open borders and free welfare for all.
And
he asked about the 2020 That is what I'm hearing when it comes to immigration.
But is that going to be a winning message?
No, that is a losing message.
How so?
I think most Americans want it easier to come here legally, harder to come here illegally, like I mentioned. And clearly, I think most folks recognize while welfare is a certain thing for certain folks in America, it shouldn't just be open the door for anybody to come to America for a free ride.
Okay, that does seem to be a sentiment from the Republican side, is what they're hearing from the Democrats is open the borders.
Yeah.
Do you agree
Well,
with
what
that?
Republicans hear from Democrats is often very, very different from what Democrats are actually saying. And so I still haven't heard of anyone
Democrats are
saying
hearing
open
that.
the border and let everyone live on the dole. I haven't heard one of the candidates say that. I do think, though, that for Democrats, focusing on dreamers, focusing on kids who have been raised here their entire lives, not born here, but raised here their entire lives, who are contributing to society, who are Americans. That's really what we ought to be focusing on, and I think they're doing that. But I think that really ought to be the focus right now.
All right, let's move on to economics and trade. We're seeing a lot of fluctuation in the market. In fact, don't even look at your accounts right now, right? Because they're so up and down. President Trump's insisting, though, that it's worth the short-term pain for long-term gain. Do you like what you're seeing with his trade strategy?
No, generally no. I mean, I recognize we got issues with China. We need to deal with some of those issues with China. But the simple fact is, I'm a free trade guy, and there's a lot of trade uncertainty. And if he was more consistent about what he was actually trying to accomplish, let's say, like Babe Ruth calling his shot, I think folks could better understand that. But when it looks like he's juking and jiving and back and forth and nobody really knows what he's doing other than he wants to take it to China, I think that's very concerning, both in the short term and in the long term.
Loving the reference to the Babe right there on a
Yeah.
Sunday morning. Your thoughts?
Well, look, I think that yeah, you can do that. I mean, there are things that can be done, but as far as pointing to your shot, I mean, what we're seeing from Republicans right now, well, not Republicans. What we're seing from Trump is, he's taking credit for a lot of economic gains and the successes of the economy that he really doesn't control. But the problem is, the fluctuations and a lot of the problems, and as John was talking about free trade, the issues there are what really is going to impact the economy long term. And so if we do start messing with trade, while it may be a popular campaign pitch for President Trump to go around and say that he's really going to be a strong man with China, if it does upend the free market society, which supposedly Republicans are all for, we're again back in bizarro world.
And when supply chains shift, it takes a while to get those to reestablish. And so this is where if you're in agriculture and all of a sudden folks start purchasing products from South America, are they going to come back and purchase from the U.S. when the trade tiff ends? I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And too often when we talk free trade, these quote-unquote free trade agreements are not really about free trade. They're about empowering bureaucrats to manage trade. And I'm a free trade guy. Let's get the bureaucrats out of the way.
All right, one question. We have 1 minute left. Are we headed toward recession?
Yes. I mean, the reason we're headed
see
there.
that coming?
Well, the economy goes in cycles.
Sure.
Okay, so we're 10 years into a.
Are we closer rather than further?
I think unless somebody really screws something up, I think we're a couple years away.
Okay.
Yes, I think we are.
And how does
closer.
that impact
I think it's
2020?
actually closer than a couple of years.
That could have a huge impact on 2020.
It could have a huge
then.
impact on 2020. And I think that if the economy stays strong, stronger. So basically, if we push off the recession until after 2020, it's going to help. It's going to help President Trump. If the recession hits before, then I think you're definitely going to see a new president in the White House.
Democrats pushing for a recession to get Trump out.
No.
I heard some call for it today.
It's all in the way you hear it, right? All right. Hey, gentlemen, great discussion. Always glad to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.